J Hams Models here with you, back with part 2 of this 148 F-16 Turkish demo team build I'm working on. You've seen the first video, we left off. There was still quite a lot of building to do, but I didn't want to bore you guys with the building, so in this one I just kind of want to concentrate with the paint process and the decals, and especially the clear coat process. Because I do lay the clear coat on pretty thick and wet sand and all that. Just kind of want to show you my process with that. So here we are. We already laid down some paint there in the intake. The intake was a real nightmare for me, as long as fit issues and seams and all that stuff. I got it as good as I can. It's not 100%, but tried my best with this build. Here I am laying some Mr. Surfacer mahogany primer. I do like the mahogany primer as opposed to the just straight black primer. It's a little bit easier to get your coverage on there. Even though this is a black paint job, I still just like using the mahogany. So before I started the primer process, I went through and cleaned the entire surface with isopropyl alcohol. Make sure to get all those finger marks, grease, anything that's on there. Make sure I clean that off and make sure I'm getting good adhesion with the primer straight to the plastic. Once I have a good base of primer down, I could feel there's a little bit of texture on there. So I go through and I wet sand it just with a 2000 grit, and then I'll go up to a 3000 grit and make sure that the surface is just as smooth as glass before I start putting down the paint. The paint I use MRP lacquer paints, and they go down really easy, not a whole lot of texture there. But as long as the primer's really good, they'll lay down pretty good. So I want to make sure that I'm setting myself up for success with this paint job and the decals and stuff. So I always do a wet sand. I want to make that surface just as perfect as can be every time. My philosophy at this stage is I'd rather be fixing imperfections in the primer stage as opposed to trying to fix things later on, with the paint. I don't want to run the risk of having to sand and possibly reprimer, and then you got to do a whole layer. So I take the precautions during the primer. Make sure I'm just not wasting paint because it ain't cheap. So now I'm just putting down the base coat of black. This is two different blacks mixed together. This is rubber black, and then I believe just regular black. I didn't want it to be super black. You'll see with the decals because some of them are black, and I wanted to have that contrast between the two. Once I got my base coat down, I had to do some masking here at the front. This top side was a lot easier than the bottom side, you'll see. Getting the tape to go around the intake mouth was a little time consuming. But this paint job has like a really cool fade. The nose cone is light ghost gray, and then it goes from dark ghost gray to medium gray to a dark gray, and then into black. Getting the fade was a little bit tricky. I don't think I did the best job. I should have taken a little bit more time with it, but ended up turning out okay. With the decals on there, you can't really see where I screwed up. I don't know if I'll tell you guys where I screwed up, but you might be able to see it. If you do see where I screwed up, let me know in the comments that you saw it. So here's where I'm having the issues on this underside, trying to get this tape to go over this contour of the intake, and then to match up perfectly with the other side, because it's just a straight line right across. Should be easy, but just trying to get over the contours was a little bit of a struggle, but I ended up getting it done, and it turned out really good. Now I got the whole thing masked off, making sure we're not going to get any overspray onto that black. Starting off with the lighter gray. Then I'll fade it back. I go back a little bit farther than I should. That way I'll be able to bring the next color into it. I just figured out that was the best way for me to get this fade. Yeah, it goes from this medium gray, and then it'll go into a darker gray that's pretty close to black, but um, and then it stops there at the black. Overall, it was a really easy and simple paint job. Um, the masking took a lot of time, took longer than the actual paint job. Um, but with this build, the main focus is the decals. Um, I've had other paint jobs that taken me 10 times as long, so I actually did this one pretty quick. So when I do paint and primer or anything, I also use a food dehydrator to dry out my paints. Um, I'll put them in there for like an hour or so, and it helps speed the process up, so I'm not just sitting around waiting. Um, I'll talk more about that when I'm doing the clear coat. Well, now we've come to the main event of this build in this video. These decals. Um, this first one that I put on right here, I mean, I struggled with it hard. You can see right there, I just broke a piece off. To get these to conform to these weird shapes, and they didn't really match up all that well. I'll show you some more in here where the lettering on the back doesn't match up. Um, but I had issues with getting the wrinkles out. Um, you'll see me, I try to push all the liquid out, and then I was using a Q-tip, and I use a wet Q-tip, wet fingers, and I just couldn't get these wrinkles out. I actually ended up rubbing off some of the gold color, and it kind of left like a different color underneath, kind of like that green copper tarnish color. You can't really tell, but I know it's there. I mean, you guys know it's there now. But I mean, it's not like super prominent. But yeah, I struggled really hard here. This one decal took a lot longer than it should have. But I'm not trying to say anything bad about these decals. They were actually really good. And once I used Microsol, I was using Microsol and Microset the entire time. Those are my go-to solvents for decals. They work really good, and they worked phenomenal on these decals. These were really thin, but pretty easy to work with, especially on the flat surfaces like here on the wings. See there, you can see the difference between the black that I was talking about. I wanted to make sure that was very prominent, but on the easy surfaces, these decals were an absolute dream to work with. They weren't as fragile as I thought they'd be. I just wish the instructions would have maybe helped me out a little bit more, told me the process of putting them on, like certain ones need to go in a certain order. I didn't learn that. I learned that a little bit too late on some of them. But once they got the microsol, the wrinkles weren't really an issue. I mean, you can still kind of see them if you look really close. Um, but I mean, other than pulling out a magnifying glass and really looking for a problem, you're not going to see it. And then I show you some different tricks that I used for these decals here in a little bit. Um, just messing around with filming. I did do some time lapse filming and everything. So another one of the issues that arises with these decals um, is when you go to put them to side by side, like right there on the right wing. That's I think that's 3 or 4 different decals. Um, and once you put one on and you go to put the second one on, it pushes the other one out of alignment. Um, or when you go to, you know, get the liquid out with the decal, it ends up moving it around. So what I figured out how to do it was I would lift it up with the tweezers and then overlap it, and then as opposed to just trying to push them up to each other, it was better to overlap it, and then you can kind of pull it down, work it the way you want to. You can see me working it with my fingers. I just make sure that always make sure that your fingers are wet whenever you're going to be touching a decal. Nothing's worse than touching a decal with your finger with a dry finger, and then it sticks to your finger, and then you're pulling it all over the airplane, and it folds up on itself. Um, I do enjoy doing decals. It's one of my favorite parts of the build. Um, so I did have fun doing this. It was frustrating at certain points, but I think that's when a build starts really coming together, really coming to life. When you start to see the decals go on, and I mean, obviously, this one's telling, you know, a different story than just a regular, um, Air Force jet, with just regular stencils on there and all that. Like, I really, I mean, I picked this jet for a reason to do this build. And like, as soon as I saw these decals, it just spoke to me. I was like, oh man, I got to get these. So I think in total, the whole decal process, I think it took me 3 or 4 days, because I ended up doing it in sections. And then not only is there these decals, but then you got to put the stencil decals over these ones. So it was quite a process, but I did the whole top side, and then I did the bottom, and then I even split up the clear coat. I did the top first, and I did the bottom. You'll see why I did that here in a little bit. This back half was the easy part. Looking back on it now, I could have cut the big ones down into smaller pieces, and it would have been a little bit easier. Here I'm just showing you in a time lapse how the microsol works, with a blow dryer, trying to get it to go over these certain shapes and stuff. And you can see how it just gets those wrinkles out. Magic. Um, so here's the what I believe to be the hard part. Um, I don't know why these decals, not necessarily these ones, but the ones a little bit forward of this. Um, yeah, they just did not fit good. I had a lot of issues. I think I actually had to pull this decal up, um, to put some of the black ones down first. Like that's what I was talking about with the instructions. Like I wish it would have given a little bit more guidance. Said, hey, maybe these ones go down first, but you're just kind of guessing. They're in a foreign language, so it could actually say that, and I just don't know. Looking back on it now, I guess I could have, put them in Google Translate. I'm just not tech savvy. So here, putting these black ones on here on the front, I did have to pull that one up to put this one down first because it does go over it. Here's where the trouble really started. Um, Trying to get it to go over where the machine gun is, and these did not line up where they were supposed to. But yeah, just over these complex shapes right here, because there's that little lump um, behind uh, the machine gun barrel. They did not want to lay down there. And it did cause issues later on. Once I put the clear coat on too, I'll explain that in a little bit as well. Um, but then also getting them to match up with the other side, um, it was a nightmare. So I just did the best that I could and just soldered on. Here I'm just putting the stencils and stuff over the top of these. Um, there is some wrinkles in the decals, some definite issues that did arise, um, but they came only after the clear coat was on. And before I did the bottom part, the bottom decals, I realized I needed to paint this APU door. So here I am doing that. Got it all masked off, starting off with a little bit of stainless steel. Then I go in with some metallic purple. Um, I really like doing these with the, you know, not just plain, chrome or anything like that. I want to make it look like some heat's been going through here because in reference photos, they got that heat staining to it. So once I lay down the purple, and I put down some metallic blue, and then to top it off, I go over it with some clear orange, and that's what really brings it to life. Um, that's where it really starts to look like it's been hot, been heated up, been used. Um, it's the cherry on top is this clear yellow or clear orange. So once I got all the decals done, um, each time, like for the top, I let it sit in the food dehydrator for about 10 hours at about 130 degrees. Then I did the bottom, same thing, let it sit in the food dehydrator. Just make sure those are really solid and down. Um, then I moved on here to the clear coat. I just used Tamiya clear coat, and I cut it with Tamiya lacquer thinner. Um, I don't know the exact ratio, um, but I just make sure it's easy to go through the airbrush. I use a 0.5 needle, nozzle and needle on this airbrush that I use here. Um, and I do 2 really good coats of clear. And then once I'm done with the clear, I just put straight lacquer thinner in my airbrush, and then I spray that over the clear coat. And that makes it super shiny, super hard. I mean, it's smooth as glass. Um, and then I have no issues. I've used other clears before, but I've been using Tamiya clear for the last year or so, and I've fallen in love with it. I'm not going to go back to anything else. So those were the 2 clear coats, and then this is the coat of just straight lacquer thinner, and it kills 2 birds with 1 stone. Um, spraying over the clear like this, and then it also cleans the airbrush at the same time. And then I'll just go back through with some alcohol and clean that out. But as you can see, I'm doing really wet coats. Like, I'm really letting this stuff fly through the airbrush. I want it on there thick. Um, just for the fact that I know that I'm going to do a wet sand. I wasn't sure if I was going to buff um, the paint or not. I did experiment with buffing and polishing, and it didn't really work out with this clear. I wish I knew what clear to get, like the automotive clear that the guys use and all that, to where I could buff it out. But for this, once I did the wet sand, here I am doing the wet sanding. Uh, Once I got done with the wet sand, um, I then sprayed another coat of clear over, um, because I had to try to sand out these wrinkles. There's a little bit of texture, and for some reason, some of the decals, once they got hit with the clear coat, I'm not sure if it was the lacquer thinner in there or whatever. Some of them wrinkled up, um, especially on the bottom. The gold ones did. They had an issue. Some of the black ones did as well. But these were like little air bubbles and stuff under here. So I tried to sand them out as best as I could. Um, but I also didn't want to sand too far to where there's a couple spots where some of the decal did come up, which, um, is unfortunate, but it is what it is. I did end up getting it smooth, but you can see a couple spots where the decal came up where I sanded a little bit too much. So here I'm just wiping it off, wiping the excess water off with a little toilet paper. Just for this process right here, I bought this brush. This is the Tamiya anti-static brush, and I wanted to see how good this thing works because I've never used it before. And man, what a good purchase this was. Um, absolutely no lint, anything left behind after using this brush. I'm going to be using it a lot more from now on. So one of the parts that it skipped right here was um, I did spray another layer of clear after the wet sanding, and then every time I did the clear, it sat in the food dehydrator for 10 hours at 130 degrees, just to make sure it was nice and solid. So now I've moved on to making the base for this, since it is an in-flight build. I just had this piece of wood laying around. I was going to use it for something else, but I figured I'd use it for this build. I had my friend Sean make me up these masks for this. I kept it pretty simple. So I was just going to do the Turkish flag here on the base. A little bit of red, a little bit of white. Keep it simple. And it contrasts really good against the black of the jet. This is definitely something that I want to do more of and work on and get better at in the future. Working on bases and dioramas, stuff like that. I think with a good base and or a good diorama, they really just put the build over the top. Um, Here I did have some issues with this one. You can see where the tape had already lifted up, kind of leaked through. Um, Not the best. I did go and do some touch-up work on there, but I think it's good enough for what I'm trying to do. Now we're just moving on here to the finishing touches. Um, Marker lights. Um, Either putting some white or some chrome behind, certain colors, the red, the green. These ones I put white here, and then I put UV resin over it to give that lens effect. If anybody's done the Hasegawa F-16, they know here it's molded in where these lights are, these marker lights. I drilled those out, put some styrene behind it, so it actually looks like a light now. You can also see that I'm using these white gloves as I'm handling the jet, because definitely easy to get fingerprints on this, and they are not easy to get off. Um, so here's the finished build. The pilot looks good in there. And yeah, you can see the clear coat turned out pretty good. You can see those spots where the decals got sanded down. But overall, fun build. Definitely did have a good time with the decals. If I had to do it again, I would do them a little bit different. But, for the first time working with these and the big shapes and all that stuff, I think it turned out pretty okay. But let me know what you think. We'll see you on the next one.